conclusion and future. Okay. So let me first explain what is perceptual video hashing. Okay, now if two videos look similar to the human eye, then a hash vector will be generated, and these hash vectors will be similar in nature. Now, suppose I consider a function to be a black box. The input to the function will be a video, a secret key, and the output will be a digital signature. Okay, this digital signature is derived based on the perceptual contents of the video, or based on the contents of the video, a signature is generated. Now, this signature is said to satisfy certain properties. What are those properties? That it should be a one-way function. That is, we should not be able to recover back the video from the hash. That's the first point. And the second point should be that the size of the hash vector should be much smaller compared to the size of the video, obviously, right? And the third property is that it should be perceptually robust. That is, if suppose I consider a video and another video which is near duplicate or very similar to it, another duplicate in the sense that a video which is being generated based on, say, some frame rate changes, spatial resolution changes, or some content preserving operations you would have done, right? Some near duplicate video would have been generated. Now I have two videos, and if I try to extract the hash from these two videos, and if I measure the normalized Hamming distance between the hashes between these two hashes, on an average, it should be very close to 0. Okay, that's the property of perceptual robustness. That means in general sense, since two videos are looking same, its normalized Hamming distance between the hashes should be close to 0. Now, let's go to the next property, visual fragility. Visual fragility means what? If two videos are looking different to the human eyes, then the hashes also should be completely different. So suppose I have a video and another video which is completely different, looking different to the human eye. Now, if I extract hashes from these, and if I try to measure the normalized Hamming distance between these two hashes, on an average, the normalized Hamming distance between these two should be very close to 0.5. And the next one is the unpredictability. This is basically for keeping the information secure. That is, say, suppose I have a video, okay, and I will use two different keys, secret keys, to generate a hash vector. Now, video is same, but the keys are different, right? Since the keys are different, the hash extracted from the video should also be completely different. And hence, when I try to measure the normalized Hamming distance between these two hashes, on an average, it should be close to 0.5. Let me tell you that we cannot satisfy all this property simultaneously for a given application. It's for a specific application, we would give major importance to one of the things, especially the last three. For example, if I want to design a near duplicate video retrieval, then I'll give more importance to the perceptual robustness. If I want to make it so secure for copyright protection or something, then I'll give the visual fragility and the unpredictability property the more importance than the perceptual robustness property. Now let us see what are the applications that can be developed using the perceptual video hashing. I have already implemented a near duplicate video retrieval using the perceptual video hashing. The other possible applications include these things. One is because since we are dealing with the information security, so let's talk in terms of that. Video integrity verification using watermarking. Now let's see what exactly is the procedure. Now, say in the there are two phases. One is the watermarking phase. Next is the verification phase. In the watermark creation phase, I have an original video. And I'll give that to the perceptual hashing function. Then I'll extract the hash from the video based on the perceptual content, and I'll use that as the watermark to the video, and I'll use some watermark embedding algorithm to get a watermark video. Now please remember that this watermark video or video which has got the watermark is generated from the hash, and this hash is dependent on the perceptual contents. It is based on the contents. Now next, now how do I verify it? Now suppose I receive the watermark video, I'll extract the watermark, and then I'll give the watermark video to the perceptual hashing function. I'll try to extract the perceptual hash from the watermark video, and then there's one parallelly I would have extracted the watermark from the given video, right? So I try to compare it. If both are same, then it is authentic, and then it is secured. Nobody has maliciously modified or have done some alteration to it. This is one way of doing it. The other way of integrity verification is using the digital signature. Say, what is the procedure? Now suppose I have a video. I'll give this video as an input to the perceptual hashing function, along with the secret key as the input. I extract the hash vector from the video based on the perceptual content. Now what I'll do is I'll use this secret key along with the hash vector. I'll give these two entities as an input to an encryption algorithm. I'll use private key to generate a digital signature. Now this digital signature is generated based on the perceptual contents of the video, and it is encrypted, so it is more secure. Now, how do I test when I receive it? This is the transmitter will send. Now, the receiver, how do I test whether it is authentic or not, whether it is correct or is it maliciously modified or not? Now, I have a video from this, whatever received. I'll try to give that as an input to the perceptual hashing function, and then try to extract the hash from it. Now, I would have got the digital signature too. Now, I'll give that as an input to the decryption algorithm along with the public key, and I'll extract the two things. One is the secret key and the decrypted hash vector. Now the hash vector are compared. If both are same, then it is authentic. Otherwise, it is been modified. This is how you can make the video content secured. Now let's go to the various existing methodologies what has been used to generate the perceptual video hashing. Okay, now first one is radial projection based video hashing by Rover et al. They had applied this technique on the image, and then they extended this idea from the image to the keyframes of the video, and hence they could generate the hash for a video by applying the radial projection technique on the keyframes of the video. Now what they have done, suppose now I have an image, I will try to calculate the variance values of the luminance components of the images along the radial line. I will rotate this radial line by 1 degree in say anti-clockwise direction, such that I cover the entire image. Now along the radial lines I have various luminance components. I'll calculate the variance. So like this, for a single radial line or a single radial projection, I get one variance value. Like this, I rotate the complete line so that I cover the frame or the image, and then I'll obtain the set of variance value. This is called as the radial variance vector. This is still dimensionally high. So what they had done was they had projected this radial variance vector onto the discrete cosine transform basis function. From there, they had extracted low to mid frequency coefficients, and then it was called as the hash vector. Now, what is the drawback of this algorithm is that it is exposed to all the non-key frame based attacks, such as frame dropping, malicious attacks on non-key frames, and unwanted frame insertions. Okay. Next is the discrete cosine transform, basically the three-dimensional discrete cosine transform based video hashing technique by Koskun and Sankur. What they had done was they had treated the video as an entire single entity, and they had projected the luminance components of the video on the three-dimensional discrete cosine transform basis functions. Once they have done that, they have got the transform domain coefficients. They had selected the low to mid frequency coefficients because that captures the perceptual features of the video. And from that, they had applied the median based quantization to extract the hash vector. Now, what is the drawback of this algorithm? It lacks in security because the basis function is predetermined, right? You all know, and anybody can generate the hash vector from a given video. So to improve the security, the authors had generated the video using randomized 3D basis functions. But yes, it showed inferior performance compared to the deterministic basis. So it's a trade-off, whether you want a secured hash function or not, depending on the application. Okay. Next, video fingerprinting based on centroids of gradient orientations. So they had, say, they have a frame. They had divided the entire frame into sub blocks, and they had calculated the gradient orientations for each sub blocks, and then the centroid of that. And once they have done for that sub block, they had repeated for the entire frame, and then they had extended for the entire video. Okay, so the final hash was obtained by concatenating the CGOs of the entire blocks. The drawback of this algorithm is that it is weak under geometric distortions like the rotation attack. Next comes the subspace projection based technique, that is tensor decomposition based video hashing algorithm by Lee and Monga. They modeled the videos as third order tensors. They experimentally validated that this type of modeling will capture both the spatial and the temporal essence of the video. So basically, they had used the parallel factor analysis to obtain the subspace projection techniques. And from there, they had generated a compact hash vector by treating each video as a third order tensor and then factorizing it into an outer product of 3 vectors. The performance of the algorithm was found to be robust to the content preserving operations as well as the malicious modifications, but there is definitely scope for improvement. Now, from this, we can see that yes, the image hashing techniques can definitely be applied to the video hashing, but the only thing is it results in a very lengthy hash. So we think that yes, perceptual video hashing technique can definitely be improved. Okay, and then the content authentication problem. If you consider the content preserving distortion such as compression, noise addition, or filtering, it will not change the perceptual content, right? So video can still be considered to be authentic. So the performance of the video hashing algorithms for these tasks has definitely scope for improvement because the information is still secured in addition to what the some of the things, some of the processing that a video undergoes. And other one is near duplicate identification problem. The one is you can find innumerous videos in various spatial resolutions, frame rate changes, and different formats, right? Even they are very similar to nature, but if you are thinking in terms of the copyright protection, those things should be avoided, and then say that no, this video is already there and it is a near duplicate of the other, and then avoid uploading to the server. So that's how you can protect the video. Okay. So these 2 things we will try to address using the perceptual video hashing technique. So the first thing that we had worked on is the radial projection technique. Remember the Rover et al. They had used it for video for frames, keyframes. That was basically an image hashing technique applied to the video. We treated the video as a single entity. What we considered was, of course, after normalization, we will treat the video as a cube, and then we had considered a plane and a line passing through the plane. So what we did was, okay, so we now along this line we will have a luminance components of the video. So we had calculated the variance, what is the variations in the luminance values along this radial lines. Now this line was rotated by 180 degrees so that it covers the entire frame. So this covers the entire frame. Now, once the information of the frame is captured, now the information of the video has to be captured. So again, the entire plane was rotated to cover the entire video. Okay, so once the entire video is covered, we have got all the information of a video in terms of its variances. Okay, so once we have got that, so this is how we had calculated. Now this is for one particular subblock, right? Now we will discuss a procedure at how we had extracted the hash vector for a given video based on 3-dimensional radial projection technique. So this is nothing but the variance calculations, the luminance components minus the mean square for all the variances for all the luminance components that lie along the lines. So Nj represents the number of luminance components that are present along the line by 1 by Nj, the number of entities. So this is the variance. Once we have got that, mean is nothing but just add all the luminance components divided by the number of luminance components that you are considering. So you'll get Now 180, right? So 180 degree, it's rotated. Line is rotated by 180 degree. Now this plane is rotated by 180 degree. So 180 degree by 180 degree will result in 32,400 variance values. So this is what it is. So this first 180 variance values represents the, for a single plane, 180 degree rotation of the line. Next 180 degree 180 components variance values represents when the plane is rotated by another 1 degree component, and so on. This last component represents the 180 degree of a plane rotation, and within that the line is rotated by the 180 degree. So like this we had got, I know this is a huge array, right? Again, this is a huge dimensional. Again, we have a dimensional, we have to apply the dimensional reduction technique because this is a very lengthy hash. So how we have addressed all these things, so we will see that in the algorithm. Now for this we had got the two techniques, say scheme 1 and scheme 2. We have an input video, we normalize it, we do some pre-processing it, we divide the entire video into overlapping sub blocks or subcubes. Once we have got the subcubes, we apply three-dimensional radial projection techniques on the subcubes. We obtain a radial variance array of variance vectors. Now from there the technique vary, how we generate the entire hash. Till here the process is same, only thing is how we arrange the radial variance vector is differs from these two techniques. In one technique, we just perform the averaging and then projected those average mean values onto the DCT basis, and then use median based quantization to binarize, right? To binarize the component. But here, arrange the radial variance vector in terms of a matrix, apply two-dimensional discrete cosine transform, project it on, and then average it along the temporal direction, apply median based quantization, binarize it, and then obtain the final hash vector. So this is what we had done, the same discussion whatever I had told. Okay, fine. So okay, now the two schemes, right? Now what differs? Now say suppose now we have got, these are the radial variance vectors that we have got. Fine. For each subcubes, we had considered n subcubes, right? So this is for the first subcube. We have got 32,400 variance values. This is a second subcube for which you have got 32,400 variance values, and this is for the nth subcube which you have got the 32,400 variance values. Now these variances can be arranged in different form, right? So in scheme 1, what we did was, I arrange each of this vector column wise, apply the mean along the second dimension, get again a final mean vector of dimension 32,400. So thereby 32 by 32,400 dimension is now reduced to just 32,400 by 1. Okay, so now that's what we had done here. We had done applied the mean along this second dimension, and then once we have got that, project this onto the DCT basis, select low to mid frequency coefficients because that captures the perceptual essence of the video. Once you have got that, apply median based quantization to generate the hash vector. In the second hash scheme, what we did was, okay, so we had arranged each of this thing into a column vector. So this is the first column vector. This is based on the line rotation that we have got. The entire matrix represents the line rotation for a given plane. So for a given plane, now we have such 180 things, right? So we have arranged that in the z direction. This is, say, for a single line rotation on a given plane, and then we have such different things, right? So we have got it for n different subcubes. Once we have got that, we have applied two-dimensional discrete cosine transform for each of the matrix, and then we have got that, and then we have applied the averaging along the third dimension, that is in a temporal direction, and then we have got finally one RAM matrix or radial variance matrix. Select again low to mid frequency coefficients, apply median based quantization to generate the hash vector. This was the database that we had constructed. We had just considered the 1,000 videos were downloaded from the standard database, TrekVid, OpenVideo, Refit, and Sife. These are the details of the database. Minimum number of frame was 66, maximum number of frame was 11,415. Video format was MP4. Okay. What was the spatial attacks that were considered? Addition of white Gaussian noise, Gaussian blurring, average blurring, brightness modification, contrast modification, cropping from the borders, rotation, adding the watermark. Okay, so these were the spatial attacks. Temporal attacks, we had regularly dropped the frames and then tried to use interpolation to reconstruct back the frames. And then the spatial temporal attacks was the compression, unwanted frame insertions, and the reverse play. Now, before that, we want to validate whether the hash that we have generated satisfies the desirable properties or not. The desirable properties are the perceptual robustness, visual fragility, and the unpredictability property, right? So for unpredictability property, what we had done was we have a video. For a single video, 1,000 different keys were used to generate the hashes. Now, for a given video, 1,000 different keys. Now we tried to measure the normalized Hamming distance between all of this hash for a given video, and this was repeated for 224 videos using again 1,000 different keys. So whatever the normalized Hamming distance we have got, we have plotted it, and this is the x-axis represents the normalized Hamming distance, y-axis represents the frequency. See how many number of times the normalized Hamming distance 0.3 appeared, 0.4 appeared, and so on. So we have got this. It was approximately the Gaussian distribution, and you can see that mean is around the 0.5, and it is spread from 0.3 to 0.7 approximately. And if you remember that the unpredictability property, on an average, it should be concentrated around 0.5. And what about the visual fragility property? For a visual fragility property, we have 224. We had considered 224 different videos, and using the same key, we had extracted the hash. We tried to measure the normalized Hamming distance between the hashes of the 224 videos. Once we have got it, we have plotted it, and the entire procedure was repeated for 1,000 different keys for 224 videos. Whatever the normalized Hamming distance we had got, we had tried to plot it. X-axis is normalized Hamming distance, and y-axis is the frequency, the count, how much we had got for each particular measurements that we had done. Okay, and then so if you remember, as per the desirable property of the hash, on an average, for the visual fragility property, the normalized Hamming distance when the videos are different, it should be around 0.5. Again, if you see the curve, the mean is approximately 0.5, and the curve is distributed from 0.1 to 0.9. It is widespread. Okay. Now, for the perceptual robustness, if you remember, the normalized Hamming distance, which should be very close to 0. But here we have got that on an average, the mean is around 0.35, and then it is spread from 0 to 0.7. Okay. Now, what we had done for perceptual robustness is what? We have 224 different videos. We had generated a replica version or a near duplicate version of 224 videos. We tried to measure the normalized Hamming distance between the hashes of these videos. We have generated the hash using the same key, and this procedure was repeated for 1,000 different keys for 224 videos and its replica version. And then whatever the normalized Hamming distance was measured, each of the measurements and its count was measured, and we have plotted the histogram. So we have got this plot. Now, the final thing shows that we need to classify, right, whether these two videos are same or different, right? That's the only thing. So what we did was we overlapped the perceptual robustness and the visual fragility, and these two curves should be as separate as possible. Only then we can say that they are different. But you can see that based on this technique scheme 1, it is overlapping. That means it leads to a lot of misclassification. For example, if I take the threshold as say 0.4, above 0.4, I'm just taking an example, say above 0.4, I'll say that it is different, and below 0.4 it is same. But if you see that 0.4, there are so many videos, even though they are same, they are being treated as different. If it is less than 0.4, I should say that they are same, but you can see that this red line indicates that they are different videos. So they are overlapping, and it leads to misclassification, and hence the performance of the algorithm can definitely be improved. Let's see what happens to the scheme 2. Scheme 1 and scheme 2 are very similar. Only thing is there is slight improvement, but still there is definitely scope for improvement. So what I can conclude is the radial projection technique is fails to detect the near duplicate videos. But based on this, we can definitely think that this technique can be used for identifying the malicious modification. In fact, that is a recent work that we are trying to do, try to identify the malicious modification based on radial projection technique. Okay, so we had there are so many results. I'm just showing you the sample results. We are using the receiver operating characteristic curves to evaluate the performance of the algorithm. X-axis shows the false alarm probability. Y-axis shows the miss probability. What is false alarm probability? False alarm means, say, both are different, two videos are different, but you're saying that it is same. So that's a false alarm. What is miss probability? Two videos are same, but you're saying it as different. So you missed it. That is what. So all those probabilities you calculate, that is miss probability. So now you might have guessed it that the miss probability should be less. So we should not miss. And we should say that if two videos are same, it should be same. And we should not say classify it as different. And the false alarm probability also should be minimum. That is, we should, if two videos are different, we should say it as different. And if it is same, we should say it as same. So we should minimize that. So if the area under the ROC curve is minimum, then the performance of the algorithm is better. So you can see that for the Gaussian blurring, majority of the algorithm performs better. But when it comes to the noise, because the performance of the algorithm is poor, you know that once the noise is added, the variance varies. Once the variance varies, the hash vector is extracted from the variance values, if you remember that. And hence, the performance of this algorithm is poor for noise addition. Definitely after the addition of noise, if you remove the noise and then try to extract the hash, the performance improves. But this is just a scenario, right? Okay. Now that was for single attacks, and for the multiple attacks, you can see that the algorithms, the proposed algorithms have performed not that great, but definitely better compared to the centered of gradient orientation. But here it is definitely poor for. So wherever there is the noise being added, the performance of the algorithm degrades drastically. But when it is for other attacks, it is acceptable limits. The performance is still in acceptable limits. Okay, so you can say that the calculations that you are doing is only the variance, mean, and then the DCT, right? But if you see the implementation wise, it is computationally complex. Complex in the sense the number of operations required to extract the hash is too much. So that is computationally complex. And from the ROC curves, you can definitely say that the performance is poor. So from that, we can conclude that yes, definitely there is a scope for algorithm for improvement in the there is a scope for improvement in the performance. Okay, so how can we improve the performance? Next, we thought of doing the random projections. The biggest advantage in the random projection is that it doesn't require a orthogonal basis or orthonormal basis. Yes, you have heard it rightly. Because the entire linear algebra tries to say that yes, you require a orthogonal basis or orthonormal basis, but the beauty of the random projection technique is that it is almost orthogonal or almost orthonormal. Okay, so if what are such bases? How can we find such bases? Let's try to answer that. But before that, the random projection, whatever the basis you try to choose, it has to satisfy a lemma. That lemma is called as Johnson-Lindenstrass lemma. Now, what is that lemma? Okay, excuse me. Now suppose, let us consider that there are n points in d-dimensional space, and this d-dimensional space is a high dimensional space. Okay, so I'm considering n points in a very high dimensional space. I have to map these points onto lower dimensional space. I'm calling it as a k dimensional space. Now, whenever I have to do mapping, basically I'm trying to do the dimensionality reduction. So whenever I have to map, I should see that the distances are not distorted or the information is preserved. We are talking the information in terms of distances. So we are trying to preserve the distances. It cannot be same, but we have to have some bounds. Now, what is that bound? That is given by the lemma. It should not be distorted by more than a factor of 1 plus or minus alpha. Epsilon. Now, k is in the order of epsilon to the power minus 2 natural log of n. Remember, k is the lower dimensionality. That is how you derive the value of k from this. Now you can see that it is independent of d, the original higher dimensional space. Now here k is very much less than d and epsilon is greater than 0 and less than 1. Now I had told you that it has to be bounded, right? Now see, u and v, this is the L2 norm square. That is nothing but the distance between the points in the high dimensional space. Now f of u, f of v represents that the points are mapped from high dimensional space to low dimensional space. I am trying to measure the L2 norm between the points in the low dimensional space, that is represented by this term, and this is the same term, but only thing is this is scaled by 1 plus epsilon and 1 minus epsilon. So what I'm trying to say is the L2 norm between the points in the lower dimensional space is bounded by 1 plus or minus epsilon times the L2 norm distance between the points in the higher dimensional space. Okay. Now we have a projection matrix proposed by Ekloptas, which satisfies the JL lemma. The beauty of this random matrix is that it consists of only +1 and -1. Why? Because now whenever we try to multiply these two components, +1 and -1, it results in just addition and subtraction, and we don't have the burden of multiplication. So multiplication is not there, and just it involves addition and subtraction. So if you see that this is a point in d-dimensional space, this is a projection matrix of dimension k by d, and the resultant vector is of dimension k. So this is the point in low dimensional space, this is the point in high dimensional space, and this is the transformation matrix. This is a projection matrix which is projecting the point in a high dimensional space to low dimension, and this matrix proposed by Ekloptas is said to satisfy the Johnson-Lindenstrass lemma. Okay. We have used this random projection technique to generate the hash. Again, the pre-processing and normalization, depending on a secret key, get randomized overlapping subcubes from the video, and on each subcube of the video apply random projections. Once you have got random projections, you have got the points in low dimensional space. Use those points, median based quantization, and then binarize it to generate the hash vector. Okay, so to this is the nothing but this is the core what exactly we are doing. Remaining all steps, all the other blocks are almost same, but the thing is this is the important block. So you can see that projection matrix F is a feature matrix which is obtained from the overlapping subcubes of the video, scaling factor, and this is the hash matrix. Okay. Now you can see that again we had repeated whether this hash which is extracted based on the perceptual content of the video using the random projection technique satisfies the desirable properties or not. So the unpredictability property, visual fragility property, and perceptual robustness property was tested. Again, you can see that the performance of this random projection is definitely better than the radial projection technique. Okay, so it is centered around 0.5. Okay, and it is narrow. It is very close to 0.5 compared to the previous technique. Similarly, here its range is reduced and it has got a mean value of 0.5, again concentrated towards 0.5. Now again this is concentrated towards 0 as desired by the necessary property of the hash. Now you can see that when I overlap the visual fragility and the perceptual robustness, the classification, the number of misclassifications has reduced drastically. So the performance is definitely better. And how do I justify it? Again, using the receiver operating characteristic curves. Again, I'll show you some of the samples for performance of this algorithm. You can see that the one in yellow represents, and I told you that if area under the ROC curve is minimum, the performance of the algorithm is better. And you can see that this is definitely better compared to the other. But yes, it can definitely improve compared to the existing techniques. And for this noise, you can see that the random projection technique has worked very well. Okay. So again, for the multiple attacks, we have performed different attacks, but this is just a sample to show you. Okay, now computational is simple. Performance is satisfactory, but definitely it can be improved because you can see that the state of the art technique has performed well. So we have definitely scope for improvement. So what we thought was, okay, instead of applying random projection on the luminance component of the video, why not capture the perceptual features from a video and then apply the random projection technique on that perceptual feature so that we get some meaningful information in the hash. So what we did for that was we applied after doing pre-processing normalization from the input video, we had applied a temporal wavelet transform on the video in the temporal direction, and whatever the transform domain coefficients we had got, we had applied a randomization technique on this coefficients which has captured the perceptual features. Please remember we had only selected the low pass frames and not the high pass frames. Low pass frames were enough to capture the important perceptual features. And then we had applied the random projection technique on this median based quantization, binarization, the hash was generated. Okay. Again, the hash validity was performed, and you can see that this the performance of this algorithm is definitely better compared to the random projection being applied on the luminance component of the video, because it is concentrated around 0.5, unpredictability and visual fragility, and perceptual robustness is concentrated towards zero. It is moving towards zero. Definitely it is improving, and you can see that the number of misclassification has reduced considerably. But if you see the ROC curves, you can again see that yes, it is performing to the state-of-the-art algorithms, but we can definitely improve it. So the one in the dotted pink line represents the state-of-the-art algorithm, the proposed algorithm, and the other ones indicate the state-of-the-art algorithms. You can see that yes, it has definitely improved, but yes, it can has a scope for improvement for some of the attacks. So the computational complexity increases as the number of frame increases, because the number of decomposition increases. Once the number of decomposition increases along the temporal direction, the computational complexity increases. So performance has improved, but definitely has a scope for improvement. But in the existing methodologies, what we saw was that the multilinear subspace techniques had performed well, and we thought that okay, why can't we concentrate on that and then try to extract the hash from the video based on the perceptual contents using the subspace projection techniques. And here comes the next thing, that is nothing but the Tucker decomposition based video hashing algorithm. So we treat a video as a tensor. We try to decompose the tensor and then extract the information from that. So what is a rank 1 tensor? If I can decompose that video as an outer product of 3 vectors, and then this is called as a rank 1 tensor. Okay, now what this Parafact does, we have been given a video, they try to find the approximations by determining the number of rank 1 tensors. Now I can say that this video has been approximated using R rank 1 tensor, because this is rank 1, this is rank 1, this is rank 1, and how many such things are there? R. So R rank 1 tensors are used to approximate this given video. When I try to measure the error between these two, it's very close to 0. So I can use this information, compact information. Now, basically, I've tried to, instead of having this entire so much number of components, I've reduced the number of components, which basically conveys the same information in once the projection has been applied. Okay. This is the tensor decomposition. Now, let us go to the Tucker decomposition. Before that, tensor decomposition, let me tell you here. Yeah, this is the equation. We have tried to represent a tensor X as an outer product of 3 vectors A, B, C, where R represents the rank. So this is R1, R is equal to 1 to R, and this is a compact representation. Okay. So now the Tucker decomposition is a generalization of a tensor decomposition. Here, the number of components along the X, Y, and Z direction has to be same. Okay, but here the loading matrices, the number of components in the loading matrices can be different. That is, the the value of lambda, the value of mu, the value of nu can be completely different. We have that flexibility. So it is more generalization. If I want to say that, say it is similar to something but Laplace transform and Fourier transform. Laplace transform is a generalized one, whereas the Fourier transform is a special case. Okay, so because we know that the Fourier transform is applicable only for the absolutely integrable or absolutely or a stable systems or stable signals, converging signals. But in case of a Laplace transform, we can apply for a system which is even unstable or which is a divergent or which is not absolutely integrable, right? So similarly here, so Tucker decomposition is a generalization of a tensor decomposition. The core matrix captures the additional information here, okay, in this. So input video, pre-process and normalize it, randomize it, apply Tucker decomposition on this, compact representation, median-based quantization, binarization, and hash vector. Okay, hash validity has been done. You can see that this is the best that we have got, very much comparable to the state-of-the-art algorithms, very much concentrated towards zero 0.5. Unpredictability, visual fragility, and perceptual robustness is shifted towards zero. You can see that the number of misclassifications has reduced drastically. Okay. And this is, you can see that the performance of the algorithm measured in terms of the receiver operating characteristic curves. Okay. And for multiple attacks. So competition is simple. Performance is definitely superior compared to the others. So you can use this in the core of the video integrity verification that we used, whether using watermark technique or the digital signature verification technique. Okay. So the conclusion is we had discussed various existing methodologies for generation of hash from the video. And then we had also discussed the proposed techniques that have worked on radial projections, random projections, and subspace projections. And the algorithms, the Tucker decomposition based algorithm, Tucker decomposition based video hashing algorithm performed well, and it is better in terms of computation complexity and also in terms of performance. Okay. That's the conclusion from my side. Future works, those who wants to continue the research in this, we had considered only the gray component of the video because it consists of 93% of the energy. If you want to see that how that additional 7% of the energy contributes to the hash can be explored. In radial projection technique, we had rotated the line and plane by 1 degree, and that leads to a lot of data. And you can see that how 2-degree variations will affect the performance of the algorithm. That is the second scenario. Third is like we had considered the random projection by Eklund-Tast using the +1 and -1, right? There are other sparse random projection matrices which improves the computational performance, the speeding of the algorithm. You can see that and use that and see how the performance of the algorithm varies. That is one way you can do it. And then to be application specific, you can use the a priori information of the video and see that how that a priori information can be used to extract the hash from a given video and see that whether the performance of the algorithm improves. Okay. So again, there is a lot of scope for working in malicious modifications, because you know that currently a number of people modify, edit, and upload the maliciously modifications onto the database server, causing a huge data burden on the server, right? And also many copyrights violation is happening, right? So all these things is still a challenging problem you can definitely work on. We had developed a near duplicate video retrieval application by constructing a 20,000 video database, but still that is very small. I think you can consider a video database in lakhs of videos, and see that how your algorithm performs. Okay. Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Okay. If there are no questions, thank you.